The steam rose slowly from the coffee cup as Sarah Martinez adjusted her apron for the third time that morning. Rosie's Diner, located on the bustling Central Avenue in Phoenix, Arizona, buzzed with the typical noise of the morning rush. The desert sun already promised another scorching day, but inside the establishment, the air conditioning maintained a welcoming environment that contrasted with the relentless heat outside. Sarah, 28 years old, had worked as a waitress at Rosie's for the past 4 years. It was a job that paid the bills and gave her the flexibility needed to care for her 6-year-old daughter, Emma. The diner was an eclectic meeting point. Hurried executives grabbed coffee before heading to downtown skyscrapers. Retirees gathered to play dominoes at the back tables, and occasionally, more shadowy figures from the city appeared for discreet meetings. That Tuesday in September, the movement was more intense than normal. Sarah served tables with the efficiency of someone who knew every regular customer by name and knew exactly how each one liked their coffee. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her green eyes attentively observed every detail of the dining room, a skill developed over years working in establishments where attention to detail could mean the difference between a good tip and a dissatisfied customer. Rosie's Diner had a decoration reminiscent of the 1950s, with red leather booths, marble counter, and a jukebox that still worked in the corner. The walls were decorated with old photographs of Phoenix, showing the city's evolution from its beginnings as a small desert settlement to becoming the 5th largest city in the United States. Among these photographs, there was one in particular that always caught Sarah's attention, a black and white image from 1962. Showing the inauguration of a casino that had been demolished decades ago. It was around 10:30 a.m. when Vinny Torino entered the diner. Sarah recognized him immediately, not because she knew him personally, but because his reputation preceded him. Vinny was known in Phoenix as a successful businessman, owner of several legitimate enterprises, including restaurants, a construction company, and some real estate properties. However, whispers on the streets told a different story about his true activities. At 52 years old, Vinny maintained an impeccable appearance. His dark gray suit was clearly custom-made. His Italian shoes gleamed even under the diner's soft light, and his graying hair was perfectly combed back. His dark eyes had an intensity that made people look away, but also a deep sadness that few could perceive. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding, but there was a tension in his shoulders that suggested the weight of responsibilities that went far beyond conventional business. Vinny chose a corner table, away from the windows, a position that allowed him to observe both the entrance and exits of the establishment. It was a habit developed over decades of life, where paranoia wasn't a flaw, but a survival tool. He ordered only black coffee and a piece of apple pie, his low and polite voice contrasting with the intimidating reputation that surrounded him. Sarah approached the table professionally, but couldn't help noticing how Vinny seemed different from other customers. There was an aura of authority around him, but also something more, a melancholy she recognized in herself. It was the expression of someone who carried heavy secrets and memories they preferred to forget. "Anything else, sir?" asked Sarah, refilling his coffee cup. "No, thank you. Have you worked here long?" Vinny's question caught her by surprise. It wasn't common for customers to initiate personal conversations, especially someone with his reputation. 4 years, she replied, maintaining a professional but friendly tone. "It's a good place to work. The owners are fair and the clientele is interesting." Vinny smiled slightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting is a diplomatic word. I imagine you see all kinds of people here." "That's true. Phoenix attracts people from all places, each with their own story." Sarah didn't know why she was prolonging the conversation, but there was something about Vinny that sparked her curiosity. Perhaps it was the contradiction between his fearsome reputation and the genuine kindness in his voice. While they talked, Sarah noticed that Vinny's eyes wandered over the photographs on the walls. He seemed to study them with interest, as if looking for something specific. When his gaze landed on the 1962 photograph, she saw a subtle change in his expression, a tension that wasn't there before. "That photo there," said Vinny, discreetly pointing to the casino image. Do you know anything about it? Sarah followed his gaze and nodded. It's from the inauguration of the old Oasis casino. It was demolished in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Why do you ask? Vinny hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Curiosity. My father used to talk about that place. Said it was where big deals were made back then. Vinny's response was vague, but Sarah sensed there was much more behind his words. She had learned to read people during her years as a waitress, and something in Vinny's body language suggested that photograph had a much deeper meaning for him than simple historical curiosity. The movement in the diner began to decrease as the morning progressed. Most of the morning rush, customers had left, leaving only some retirees playing cards, and Vinny, who remained at his table, occasionally looking at the photograph on the wall. Sarah took advantage of the calmer moment to organize the counter and prepare the tables for lunch. It was then that she noticed something strange. Vinny had gotten up and was walking toward the wall where the photograph hung. He stopped in front of the image, his hands trembling slightly as he observed every detail. Sarah pretended to be busy cleaning a nearby table, but kept her eyes fixed on him. "My God," murmured Vinny, his voice almost inaudible. "After all these years!" Sarah approached discreetly, concerned about his reaction. "Mr. Torino, is everything all right?" Vinny turned to her, and Sarah was shocked to see tears in his eyes. It was a completely unexpected vulnerability coming from a man with his reputation. "Sorry," he said, trying to compose himself. "It's just, this photograph brings back many memories. Do you want to talk about it?" The question came naturally, moved by the genuine compassion Sarah felt for anyone suffering, regardless of who they were. Vinny studied her for a long moment, as if evaluating whether he could trust her. "Do you have children?" he asked finally. "A daughter, Emma. She's 6 years old." "Then you understand what it means to want to protect someone you love, no matter the cost." Vinny's voice was loaded with emotion. "Sometimes the choices we make to protect our family end up haunting us forever." Sarah nodded, thinking of her own struggles as a single mother. "We all do what we think is best at the moment. The important thing is to learn from our mistakes and try to be better." "What if the mistakes are so big that there's no going back? What if the consequences of your actions affected not just you, but innocent people?" Vinny's question was loaded with pain and regret. Before Sarah could respond, the diner door opened and 2 men entered. They wore dark suits and had the rigid posture of people accustomed to violence. Sarah immediately felt the change in the atmosphere of the place. Vinny also noticed them, and his expression hardened, the vulnerability of moments before being quickly replaced by the mask of authority he normally wore. "Boss," said one of the men approaching Vinny's table, "we need to talk." Vinny looked at Sarah and then at the photograph on the wall. "Not here," he said firmly. "Let's go to the office." The men seemed surprised by the refusal but didn't question it. Vinny got up, left a $20 bill on the table, much more than the value of his bill, and headed for the exit. Before leaving, he turned to Sarah one last time. "Thank you for the conversation," he said. "And Sarah, if anyone asks about our conversation, it would be better if you didn't remember anything." It wasn't a threat, but a warning. Sarah nodded, instinctively understanding that she had become involved in something much bigger than a simple conversation with a customer. After Vinny and his men left, she was alone in the almost empty diner, looking at the photograph that had caused such an intense reaction. She approached the image and examined it more carefully. It was a typical inauguration photograph. Men in suits posing for the camera, forced smiles, ceremonial handshakes. But now, after Vinny's reaction, Sarah began to wonder what stories that image hid. Who were those people? What business really happened at that casino? And why had the simple sight of the photograph affected such an apparently controlled man so much? The rest of the day passed slowly. Sarah served the lunch customers with her usual efficiency, but her mind kept returning to the encounter with Vinny. There was something about the intensity of his reaction that intrigued her. She had seen many people over the years, some celebrating, others suffering, some trying to forget the past. But the pain in Vinny's eyes was different. It was the pain of someone who carried a very heavy burden, something that went beyond common regret. When her shift ended, Sarah headed home. a small apartment 15 minutes drive from the diner. She lived in a modest but well-maintained residential complex in an area that was undergoing a revitalization process. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a compact kitchen. But it was her home, a place where she and Emma could be safe and build a life together. Emma was at the neighbor's house, an elderly lady named Mrs. Rodriguez, who took care of the girl after school in exchange for a small amount that Sarah could afford. It was an arrangement that worked well for both. Mrs. Rodriguez enjoyed the company, and Sarah had the peace of mind knowing her daughter was in good hands. "Mommy!" Emma ran into Sarah's arms as soon as she arrived. The girl had the same green eyes as her mother and blonde hair that shone under the Arizona sun. She was a cheerful and intelligent child, despite the difficulties they had faced together. "How was school today, my love?" asked Sarah, hugging her daughter tightly. "It was great. The teacher said my family drawing was the best in the class." Emma proudly showed a paper with a colorful drawing of 2 stick figures, her and Sarah, holding hands in front of a house. Sarah smiled, feeling her heart warm. No matter how difficult her day was, Emma always managed to make everything worthwhile. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Let's put it on the refrigerator with the others." While preparing dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, Emma's favorite dish, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Vinny and the photograph. There was something about the way he had looked at the image that suggested a deep personal connection. It wasn't just nostalgia or historical curiosity. It was something much more intimate and painful. After dinner, while Emma did her homework at the kitchen table, Sarah turned on her laptop and decided to research the Oasis Casino. The internet offered limited information about the establishment. It had been inaugurated in 1962 and operated until 1984, when it was closed due to financial irregularities. The Phoenix Public Library website had some photographs from the historical archive, including the same image that hung in the diner. But it was on a local history forum that Sarah found something interesting. A user had posted a question about the casino, mentioning that his grandfather had worked there in the 60s and always talked about strange business that happened in the back of the establishment. Another user responded saying that the casino was known for being a meeting point for influential people in the city, but that many of the details had been conveniently forgotten after the closure. Sarah was about to close the laptop when she received a text message from an unknown number. "Don't ask questions about things you don't understand. Some memories are dangerous." Her blood ran cold. How did someone know she was researching the casino? She looked around the apartment, checking if the doors were locked, and approached the window to look at the street. Everything seemed normal. Parked cars, some people walking, nothing out of the ordinary. But the message left her deeply unsettled. "Mommy, are you okay?" Emma had noticed the change in her mother's behavior. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." Sarah forced a smile and closed the laptop. "How about we take a bath and watch a movie before bed?" While Emma bathed, Sarah checked all the locks again and closed the curtains. The message could be a coincidence, or maybe someone was monitoring her online activities. Either way, she decided it would be more prudent not to continue researching the casino, at least for now. Later, after Emma fell asleep, Sarah lay awake in bed, looking at the ceiling and thinking about the day's events. There was something about Vinny that intrigued her beyond curiosity. Perhaps it was the fact that beneath the intimidating facade, she had seen a man genuinely tormented by his past. Or perhaps it was because she herself knew the feeling of carrying secrets and trying to protect someone she loved. Sarah had grown up in a dysfunctional family in Tucson. Her father had abandoned the family when she was 12, and her mother struggled with alcoholism. She had learned early to be independent and take care of herself. When she became pregnant with Emma at 22, the child's father, a married man who had lied about his situation, disappeared as soon as he learned about the pregnancy. Sarah made the decision to raise her daughter alone and moved to Phoenix in search of a new beginning. The first years were extremely difficult. She worked various jobs, cleaning, sales, customer service, always struggling to balance the responsibilities of a single mother with the need to support the family. The job at Rosie's Diner had been a blessing. The owners, an elderly couple named Frank and Rose Kowalski, were decent people who understood Sarah's difficulties and offered flexible hours and a respectful work environment. Now at 28, Sarah had built a stable life for her and Emma. It wasn't a luxurious life, but it was honest and full of love. She had learned to value small victories: a bill paid on time, a smile from Emma, a satisfied customer at the diner. It was a simple existence, but meaningful. But the encounter with Vinny had awakened something in Sarah that she didn't expect. Perhaps it was the natural curiosity of someone who always observed people and tried to understand their stories. Or perhaps it was a deeper connection with the pain she had seen in his eyes. Either way, she knew that encounter had changed something, and that the photograph in the diner would never again be just an old decoration for her. As she finally fell asleep, Sarah couldn't imagine that her life was about to become complicated in ways she could never have predicted. The photograph that had caused such an intense reaction in Vinny held secrets that connected the past to the present in dangerous ways, and her innocent curiosity was about to place her at the center of a web of mysteries that went back decades. Sarah's last thought before falling asleep was about the text message she had received. Who had sent it? How did they know about her research? And more importantly, what kind of danger might she and Emma be facing now? Outside the apartment, a dark car was parked on the street, its occupants silently watching the windows where the lights had just gone out. The desert night was silent, but charged with tension, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see how events would unfold. The photograph in Rosie's diner continued hanging on the wall, keeping its secrets in the darkness of the closed establishment. But now, after so many years, someone had finally looked at it and recognized something that should have remained buried in the past. And this discovery was about to unleash a series of events that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The next morning arrived with the typical Phoenix heat in September. Sarah woke to the sound of the alarm at 5:30 a.m., as she always did to have time to prepare Emma for school before going to work. But this time, sleep had been restless, interrupted by confused dreams about old photographs and men in suits watching her from afar. While preparing breakfast, Sarah discreetly checked the street through the kitchen curtain. The dark car she had noticed the night before was no longer there, but that didn't completely reassure her. The text message still echoed in her mind. "Don't ask questions about things you don't understand." "Mommy, you're acting strange today," observed Emma, chewing her cereal. The girl had a sharp perception for someone so young, a quality that sometimes worried Sarah. In a world where it wasn't always safe to be too observant, she wanted to protect her daughter's innocence for as long as possible. "I'm just thinking about work, sweetheart," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. "Today's going to be a busy day at the restaurant." After dropping Emma off at school, Sarah drove to Rosie's diner with a sense of apprehension she couldn't explain. The establishment looked exactly the same as always. The same tables, the same counter, the same jukebox in the corner. But when her eyes landed on the 1962 photograph, she felt a chill run down her spine. Frank Kowalski, the diner's owner, was already there when she arrived. At 68, Frank was a robust man with graying hair and calloused hands that told the story of a life of hard work. He and his wife Rose had bought the diner 15 years ago, transforming it from a decaying establishment into a respected community meeting point. "Good morning, Sarah," greeted Frank, looking up from the accounting books he was reviewing. "You look tired. Everything okay at home?" "Everything's fine, Mr. Kowalski. Just a bad night's sleep." Sarah tied her apron and began checking the tables, a routine that normally calmed her. "Do you know the history of that photograph on the wall? The one of the old casino?" Frank followed her gaze and frowned. "The Oasis Casino? Why do you ask?" "A customer yesterday was very interested in it. I got curious about the place's history." Frank stood up and walked to the photograph, studying it with a thoughtful expression. "Rose and I bought that photo along with other decorations when we took over the diner. The former owner said they were part of the place's historical atmosphere." He paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "But I grew up in Phoenix, Sarah. I remember when that casino operated. It wasn't exactly a place for families." "What do you mean?" Let's say there were rumors about the type of business that really happened there. Illegal gambling, money laundering, meetings between people who preferred not to be seen together. Frank lowered his voice. My father used to say that the Oasis was where Phoenix's powerful went when they wanted to solve problems that couldn't be solved in conventional offices. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. And what happened to the place? It was suddenly closed in 1984. There was a federal investigation, but most of the records were lost or damaged. The people involved either disappeared or found very convincing ways to forget what they knew. Frank looked directly into her eyes. Why are you asking about this, Sarah? This customer who showed interest, who was he? Before Sarah could answer, the diner door opened and Vincent Torino entered again. This time he wasn't alone. A woman accompanied him, elegant, around 45, with perfectly arranged blonde hair and expensive clothes that screamed sophistication. But there was something in her blue eyes that suggested a sharp intelligence and a determination that could be dangerous. Frank immediately moved away from the photograph and returned behind the counter, his body language changing to something more cautious. Sarah noticed the tension and headed to the table where Vinny and his companion sat, the same corner table he had chosen the day before. Good morning, said Sarah, keeping her voice professional. What can I serve you? Black coffee for me, said Vinny, avoiding direct eye contact. And for the lady? Skim milk coffee and whole wheat toast, replied the woman with a soft but authoritative voice. When Sarah turned to get the orders, the woman added, And honey, could you give us a few minutes of privacy? We have important matters to discuss. It wasn't a request, but a polite order. Sarah nodded and moved away, but couldn't help noticing that Vinny seemed uncomfortable with the woman's presence. There was a tension between them that went beyond a simple business meeting. While preparing the coffee, Sarah tried to hear fragments of the conversation, but they spoke in low voices. Occasionally, she caught isolated words: photograph, risks, silence, family. The woman seemed to be doing most of the talking, while Vinny responded with monosyllables or nods. It was then that Sarah noticed something that made her freeze. The woman was looking directly at her, a calculating look that made her feel like she was being evaluated. When their eyes met, the woman smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes and sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Sarah, called Vinny, signaling for her to approach. I'd like you to meet an associate of mine, Elena Vasquez. Elena extended her hand with a smile that seemed genuine, but Sarah noticed her eyes remained cold. Pleasure to meet you, Sarah. Vincent told me about your conversation yesterday. He said you're very observant. I just do my job, replied Sarah, briefly shaking Elena's hand. The woman's skin was surprisingly cold. Of course, and I imagine part of your job is being discreet about the conversations you hear, isn't it? Elena tilted her head slightly, as if asking an innocent question, but the tone suggested something very different. I don't usually get involved in customers' personal affairs, said Sarah, feeling the need to make her position clear. That's good, said Elena, her smile widening, because sometimes when people get involved in matters they don't fully understand, they can end up getting hurt or hurting people they love. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah felt her heart race, but maintained a neutral expression. Can I bring anything else for you? No, thank you, said Vinny quickly. We're fine like this. Sarah moved away, but could feel Elena's eyes following her every movement. She pretended to be busy organizing the counter, but her mind was racing. Elena's presence completely changed the dynamics of the situation. If Vinny had seemed tormented and vulnerable the day before, now he seemed tense and controlled, as if he were being watched. The conversation between them continued for another 20 minutes. Sarah noticed that at several moments, both looked at the photograph on the wall. Elena seemed to be asking specific questions, pointing to different people in the image, while Vinny responded with obvious reluctance. Finally, Elena got up to go to the bathroom, leaving Vinny alone at the table. Sarah took the opportunity to approach with the coffee pot, pretending to refill his cup. Is everything all right? She asked in a low voice. Vinny looked at her with an expression that mixed gratitude and concern. Sarah, I need you to listen to me carefully. Yesterday I made a mistake by reacting to the photograph in front of you. Now there are people who think you know more than you should know. But I don't know anything, protested Sarah. I just saw that the photo affected you somehow. I know that, and you know that. But Elena, she's not the type of person who accepts risks, even the smallest ones. Vinny lowered his voice even more. She wants to make sure you won't cause problems, and her ways of making sure can be extreme. Sarah felt her blood freeze. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to be very careful. Don't ask more questions about the photograph. Don't research the casino. Don't mention our conversation to anyone. Vinny looked directly into her eyes. And if someone comes asking questions about me or about what we talked about, you don't remember anything. Understood? Before Sarah could respond, Elena returned from the bathroom. Her gaze immediately fixed on the proximity between Sarah and Vinny, and her expression hardened slightly. I hope we're not interrupting your work, said Elena, returning to her place at the table. Not at all, replied Sarah, moving away quickly. I was just checking if you needed anything else. Elena studied Sarah for a long moment before responding. Actually, there is something. My company is always looking for reliable people for special jobs. People who know when to speak and, more importantly, when not to speak. Would you be interested in earning some extra money? The offer caught Sarah by surprise. What kind of work? Nothing complicated, just observing certain people, reporting certain conversations, keeping your ears open for specific information. Elena took a business card from her pocket and placed it on the table. Think about it. The payment would be very generous. Sarah looked at the card. It was simple, just a name, Elena Vasquez, and a phone number. No company, no title, no indication of the type of business Elena really conducted. I need to think about it, said Sarah. Of course, but don't think for too long. Opportunities like this don't come up often. Elena stood up, followed by Vinny, and Sarah. Remember what we talked about regarding discretion. It's a very valuable quality in our line of work. After they left, Sarah was alone with Frank, who had observed the entire interaction from afar. He approached her with a worried expression. Sarah, do you know who those people were? The man said his name is Vincent Torino. The woman is Elena Vasquez. Frank paled. My God, Sarah. Vincent Torino is, well, let's say he's not exactly a conventional businessman. And if he was with Elena Vasquez, Frank shook his head. Elena is known for solving problems for people like Torino. Problems that involve making people disappear or change their minds about certain things. Sarah felt her legs go weak. What are you saying? I'm saying you've gotten into something very dangerous. Elena Vasquez has a reputation. She's known for being ruthless when it comes to protecting her clients' interests. Frank looked at the photograph on the wall. And if they're interested in that photo, it means there's something about the past that someone wants to keep buried. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety for Sarah. She served customers mechanically, her mind constantly returning to the conversation with Vinny and Elena. Elena's job offer echoed in her head. It was clearly an attempt to co-opt her, to transform her from a possible threat into a controlled ally. But what worried her most was the implicit threat. Elena had mentioned people you love, an obvious reference to Emma. The idea that her daughter could be in danger because of her innocent curiosity about an old photograph made her nauseous. During her lunch break, Sarah tried to research Elena Vasquez on her phone, but found very little. There were some mentions in newspaper articles about lawsuits involving private security companies, but nothing specific. It was as if Elena existed in the shadows, visible only when necessary. It was then that Sarah received another text message, this time from a different number. Accept the offer. It's safer for everyone. This time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She immediately called Emma's school to check if everything was okay. The secretary reassured her, saying Emma was in class and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But Sarah didn't feel relieved. If Elena really was as dangerous as Frank suggested, a phone call wouldn't be enough to ensure her daughter's safety. When her shift ended, Sarah drove directly to Emma's school. She arrived 15 minutes before dismissal time and waited in the parking lot, observing every person who approached the building. Her paranoia was increasing, but she preferred to be overly cautious rather than take unnecessary risks. Emma came out of school with her usual smile, running to the car when she saw Sarah. "Mommy, you arrived early today." "I thought we could do something special," said Sarah, hugging her daughter tighter than normal. "How about we go to the mall and then have dinner out?" "Really? But it's not my birthday or anything." "Sometimes we don't need a special reason to do special things," replied Sarah, trying to keep her voice cheerful despite the anxiety she felt. While driving to the mall, Sarah constantly checked the rear-view mirror. There were no signs they were being followed, but she couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. The mall offered the safety of crowds and multiple exits in case they needed to leave quickly. During dinner at a family restaurant in the mall, Emma chattered about her day at school, apparently oblivious to her mother's tension. Sarah tried to concentrate on the conversation, but her mind kept returning to the situation she found herself in. How had a simple waitress become involved in something so complicated and potentially dangerous? It was then that she noticed a man sitting alone at a nearby table. He was reading a newspaper, but Sarah noticed his eyes occasionally drifted to her and Emma. When she looked directly at him, the man quickly returned his attention to the newspaper. But Sarah had noticed something that made her freeze. He wore a dark suit, similar to those of the men who had accompanied Vinny the day before. "Emma," said Sarah, trying to keep her voice calm, "how about we go to the bathroom before we go home?" In the bathroom, Sarah called Frank Kowalski. "Mr. Kowalski, it's Sarah. I need to ask a strange question. Do you still have the number of the diner's former owner? The one who sold the photographs along with the establishment?" "I think so, somewhere in the old files." "Why?" "I need to know more about that casino photograph. I think I've gotten into something very serious, and I need to understand what's happening." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sarah, maybe it would be better if you left this alone. Some stones are better left unturned." "I wish I could do that, Mr. Kowalski, but I think it's too late for that." Sarah looked at Emma, who was washing her hands at the sink next to her. "My daughter might be in danger because of something I don't even fully understand." Frank sighed. "All right. I'll look for the number and send it to you by message. But Sarah, be very careful. If you're right about being involved with these people, then you're dealing with very dangerous forces." When they left the bathroom, the man in the dark suit had disappeared. Sarah and Emma quickly finished their meal and left the mall, Sarah constantly checking if they were being followed. The way home seemed longer than normal, every shadow and every car behind them a potential source of threat. At home, after Emma went to sleep, Sarah finally received Frank's message with the former diner owner's number. She hesitated for a long moment before dialing. Making this call meant delving even deeper into something that was already beyond her understanding. But the alternative, living in constant fear and not knowing what kind of danger she and Emma faced, seemed worse. The phone rang several times before a hoarse voice answered. "Hello? Mr. Morrison? My name is Sarah Martinez. I work at Rosie's Diner, which you used to own. I'm calling about one of the photographs you left there when you sold the establishment." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What photograph?" "The one of the Oasis Casino from 1962. I need to know more about it. It's very important." Another silence, even longer. When Morrison finally spoke, his voice was loaded with fear. "Girl, you shouldn't be asking questions about that photo. You shouldn't even be looking at it." "Please, Mr. Morrison. I think I've gotten into trouble because of it, and I need to understand what's happening." "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" Morrison's voice became higher. Sarah briefly told about the encounter with Vinny and Elena, omitting some details, but making it clear there were dangerous people interested in the photograph. "My God," murmured Morrison. "After all these years." "Listen, girl, that photograph shows something that many powerful people would prefer had never been documented. There are people in that image who did terrible things, and there are secrets that were buried along with the casino." "What kind of secrets?" Morrison hesitated. "Do you have children?" "A daughter." "Then you understand that there are things for which a person would do anything to protect their family, even things that go against everything they believe in." His voice was trembling now. "That photograph, it shows the moment when certain alliances were formed. alliances that changed the course of many lives, and that cost dearly for many people. Can you be more specific? Not over the phone. And honestly, girl, the less you know, the safer you'll be. My advice is, forget that photograph. Forget those people and pray they forget about you. The call ended, leaving Sarah alone with more questions than answers. She looked at Elena Vasquez's business card on her coffee table. The job offer seemed more and more like a trap, a way to keep her under control while they figured out exactly how much she knew or suspected. But now Sarah was beginning to understand that her innocent curiosity had awakened to something that had been dormant for decades. The photograph in Rosie's diner wasn't just an old decoration. It was evidence of something that powerful people wanted to keep buried. And now she was at the center of a situation that could cost much more than she ever imagined. While checking the door and window locks once more, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't simply wait and hope the problem would disappear. If she wanted to protect Emma and herself, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. And that meant discovering the truth about that photograph, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. Outside, Phoenix's desert night was silent, but in the shadows, forces that had remained dormant for decades were beginning to move again. The photograph had awakened memories that some people would do anything to keep buried, and Sarah Martinez, a simple waitress trying to protect her daughter, was about to discover that some truths have a very high price. Thursday morning brought with it a sandstorm typical of autumn in Phoenix. The sky was tinted an ominous orange color, and the wind carried fine particles that infiltrated through every crack. Sarah woke with the feeling that nature itself reflected the turbulence of her life in recent days. Emma was especially animated that morning, talking nonstop about a school project about Arizona history. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Her daughter was studying the state's past, while she herself was being haunted by secrets buried decades ago. "Mommy, did you know Phoenix used to be much smaller? The teacher said that in the 60s it was almost like a small town compared to today," chattered Emma while having her breakfast. "Really, sweetheart?" Sarah tried to maintain interest, but her mind was elsewhere. The call with Morrison the night before had confirmed her worst fears. The photograph really hid something significant and dangerous. After dropping Emma off at school, Sarah drove to work with renewed determination. She had made a decision during the sleepless night. If she couldn't escape the situation, at least she would try to understand it completely. Knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, was better than ignorance when it came to protecting her daughter. Rosie's diner was busier than normal due to the sandstorm. Many people preferred to wait for the weather to improve before continuing their travels. Sarah took advantage of the commotion to discreetly observe every customer who entered, looking for familiar faces or suspicious behavior. It was around 10 o'clock that she noticed an elderly man sitting alone at a table near the window. He appeared to be in his 70s, with sparse white hair and trembling hands that held a coffee cup. What caught Sarah's attention was the way he looked at the casino photograph, not with casual curiosity, but with recognition and something that seemed to be melancholic nostalgia. Sarah approached the table with the coffee pot. "More coffee, sir?" The man looked at her with faded but still intelligent blue eyes. "Please, dear. And, excuse the question, but have you worked here long?" 4 years. "Why?" He hesitated, looking again at the photograph. "It's just, I recognize that photo on the wall. It's been a long time since I've seen it." Sarah felt her heart race. "Do you know its history?" "I know more than I'd like to," murmured the man. "My name is Arthur Brennan. I was a photographer for the Arizona Republic in the 60s. I was the one who took that photo." Sarah almost dropped the coffee pot. "Really?" Arthur nodded slowly. "It was at the inauguration of the Oasis Casino in March 1962. I was there covering the event for the newspaper. At the time, it seemed like just another business inauguration, but..." He paused, studying Sarah's face. "Why are you interested in this photo, dear?" Sarah looked around the diner, checking if anyone was paying attention to the conversation. "It's complicated. Let's say some people became uncomfortable when I showed curiosity about it." Arthur frowned. "What kind of people?" "The kind that doesn't like questions." Sarah lowered her voice. "Mr. Brennan, Do you remember anything specific about that day? Something that might explain why this photo still bothers certain people?" Arthur was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the photograph. "Do you have children?" he asked finally. "A daughter. Then you understand that there are moments in life when we witness things we'd rather not have seen. That day at the casino was one of those moments for me." He took a sip of coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be telling this, but after so many years, and if you're already involved..." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat next to him. "Please, tell me. I need to understand what's happening." Arthur looked around nervously before continuing. "The official inauguration was during the day, but there was a private meeting at night. I was storing my equipment when I saw some important people arriving. Politicians, businessmen, people I recognized from the newspapers. But there were others too. Men who clearly weren't the type who frequent conventional social events." "What kind of men?" "The type that solves problems with methods that don't appear in newspapers." Arthur lowered his voice even more. "I was young and curious, so I hid and took some photos of the meeting. What I saw that night, well, it changed my perspective on how certain things really work in this city." Sarah felt a chill. "What did you see?" "I saw money changing hands. I saw deals being made between people who officially never knew each other. And I saw..." Arthur hesitated as if the words were difficult to pronounce. "I saw a young man being forced to sign some papers. He didn't want to sign, was clearly afraid, but had no choice." "Who was the young man?" "At the time, I didn't know. But years later, when I began following the city's business more closely, I discovered it was Vincent Torino. He was only 22 at the time." Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Vincent Torino was at that meeting." "He was, and by the expression on his face, he wasn't there by choice." Arthur studied Sarah's reaction. "Do you know him?" He was here a few days ago. He was very disturbed when he saw the photograph." Arthur nodded slowly. "I imagine so. That night probably changed his life forever, and not for the better." "What happened afterward? With the photos you took?" "Ah, that's the interesting part of the story." Arthur smiled bitterly. "The next day, when I arrived at the newspaper to develop the film, I discovered that my editor had received a very convincing suggestion that it would be better if those photos were never published. The film disappeared, and I received an unexpected promotion to cover sports events instead of politics and business." "But the official inauguration photo was published." "Yes, because it was harmless. Just men in suits smiling for the camera during the day. Nothing that could compromise anyone." Arthur pointed to the photograph on the wall. "But even this apparently innocent photo contains clues for those who know what to look for." Sarah studied the image with new eyes. "What kind of clues?" "Look at the people in the photo. Not just at who's in the foreground, but at who's in the background. See that man with dark glasses in the right corner? That's Marcus Webb, who at the time was the unofficial police chief of certain areas of the city. And the blonde woman next to him, that's Catherine Morrison, who controlled several legitimate businesses that served as fronts for less legal operations." Sarah looked more carefully and could identify the people Arthur was describing. "And young Vincent, does he appear in the photo?" "Look carefully in the background on the left. There's a group of younger men. Vincent is the second from the left, the one who looks uncomfortable and is looking away from the camera." Sarah located the figure Arthur was describing. It was definitely a much younger Vincent, but even in the grainy photograph, she could see the tension in his posture and the expression of someone who would rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Brennan, do you have any idea what Vincent was forced to sign that night?" Arthur hesitated. "I never knew for sure, but based on what I observed over the years, I believe it was some kind of agreement that put him under the control of certain people. A kind of contract that guaranteed his loyalty and cooperation in exchange for, well, probably in exchange for keeping his family safe." "His family?" "Vincent had a younger sister at the time, Maria. She was only 16 and was all that remained of his family after their parents died in a car accident the year before." Arthur lowered his voice even more. "There were rumors that the accident wasn't really an accident, and that Vincent's parents' death was a message about what would happen if he didn't cooperate. Sarah felt nauseous. The idea that someone could use a child as leverage to control another person was repugnant, but it also explained a lot about Vincent's behavior. If he had been forced to enter that world to protect his sister, then his pain and regret made much more sense. What happened to Maria? She disappeared a few years later. Officially, she moved to another state to study. But Vincent was never the same after that. He became colder, more calculating, as if a part of him had died along with the hope of protecting the only person who really mattered to him. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more customers, forcing Sarah to return to work. But her mind was racing with Arthur's revelations. Vincent wasn't just a criminal who had built an empire through questionable methods. He was a victim who had been forced to make impossible choices to protect someone he loved. During her lunch break, Sarah called Emma's school to check if everything was okay. The secretary reassured her, but Sarah decided it would be prudent to make alternative arrangements for her daughter's safety. She called Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who took care of Emma after school. "Mrs. Rodriguez, it's Sarah. I need to ask a favor. Would it be possible for Emma to stay at your house for a few days? I'm having some problems at work and want to make sure she's safe." "Of course, dear. Emma is always welcome here. Is everything all right? You sound worried." "I'm dealing with some complicated situations, but I'll resolve everything soon. I just need to know Emma is in a safe place while that happens." After making arrangements for Emma, Sarah returned to work with a plan forming in her mind. If Vincent really was a victim of circumstances, perhaps there was a way to help him while protecting herself and Emma. But first, she needed more information. Arthur was still at the diner when she returned, apparently reluctant to leave. Sarah approached him again during a calmer moment. "Mr. Brennan, do you still have contacts at the Arizona Republic? People who might have access to old files?" "Some." "Why?" "I'm thinking there might be more information about that time in the newspaper's archives. Things that weren't published but were documented." Arthur studied her carefully. "Sarah, you're thinking of doing something dangerous, aren't you?" "I'm thinking of discovering the truth, and maybe helping someone who was forced to live a lie for decades." "Vincent Torino?" Sarah nodded. "If he really was coerced into entering that world, then maybe there's a way to help him get out. But I need to fully understand the situation first." Arthur was silent for a long moment. "There's one person who can help. Rebecca Chen. She's worked in the newspaper archives for over 30 years. If anyone knows where the secrets are buried, it's her." He wrote a number on a napkin. "Tell her I sent you. But Sarah, be very careful. If you're right about Vincent being a victim, then the people who control him won't like someone messing with the past." That afternoon, after Arthur left, Sarah noticed an increase in suspicious activity around the diner. Cars that passed too slowly, people who entered just to order coffee and leave quickly, looks that lasted a little longer than normal. It was as if she were being watched by multiple sources. Around 4 o'clock, Vincent entered the diner alone. This time, he looked different, more tired, more defeated. He headed directly to the corner table, but not before looking long at the photograph on the wall. Sarah approached carefully. "Black coffee, please." Vincent looked into her eyes for the first time since their first encounter. "Sarah, I need to talk to you. It's important." "I'm listening." "Not here. It's too dangerous." He looked around nervously. "Do you have a break soon?" "In 15 minutes. There's a small park 2 blocks from here, on Oak Street. Meet me there." Vincent left money on the table and stood up. "And Sarah, come alone. If someone is following you, don't show up." After Vincent left, Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. She knew meeting him could be dangerous, but she also knew it might be her only chance to get direct answers about the situation she found herself in. 15 minutes later, Sarah informed Frank she was going on her break and walked carefully toward the park. She checked several times if she was being followed, using techniques she had learned from watching suspense movies, stopping at shop windows to check reflections, making unnecessary turns, observing if the same cars appeared repeatedly. The park was small and relatively isolated, with some trees that offered shade from Arizona's intense sun. Vincent was sitting on a bench under one of these trees, looking more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "Thank you for coming," he said when Sarah approached. I know it's risky for you. Mr. Torino, Vincent. I talked to someone today. Someone who was present at the casino inauguration in 1962. Vincent tensed. Who? The photographer who took that photo. He told me about the private meeting that night, about you being forced to sign something. Vincent closed his eyes and sighed deeply. Arthur Brennan. I remember him. A curious young photographer who almost got into big trouble for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He told me about your sister, about how you were coerced. Maria. Vincent's voice broke slightly. I hadn't heard that name in years. She was all I had left after our parents died. I would do anything to protect her. What happened to her, Vincent? Vincent looked at the sky, as if searching for strength. They kept her safe for a few years, as promised. But when she turned 18 and started asking questions about why she couldn't see me anymore, about why she had to live under a false identity, they decided she knew too much. Sarah felt her heart tighten. They killed her? Not directly, but they arranged an accident, a car accident just like our parents. Vincent finally looked at Sarah, and she saw decades of pain and guilt in his eyes. I spent the last 30 years building enough power to one day avenge the people who destroyed my family. But the more power I gained, the deeper I got involved in the same world that had destroyed everything I loved. And now I'm old and tired, and the people who controlled my life are starting to die of natural causes. But Elena represents a new generation. She doesn't have the same considerations that the older ones had. She sees any potential threat as something to be eliminated immediately. Sarah understood the implication, and she sees me as a threat. You ask questions. You showed curiosity about things that should remain buried. For Elena, that's enough. Vincent turned to her. Sarah, you need to leave the city. Take your daughter and go far from here. Change your name if necessary. I can help with money, documents. No. Sarah's response surprised him. I won't run. I won't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if they found us. Then what do you propose? Sarah took a deep breath. I propose we find a way to expose the truth. All of it. About what happened in 1962. About how you were coerced. About the people who controlled your life for decades. Vincent shook his head. It's impossible. They have too much power, too many connections. And even if we managed to expose some secrets, Elena would make sure we didn't live to see the consequences. What if there was a way to neutralize Elena first? Vincent looked at her with renewed interest. What do you have in mind? I don't know exactly yet, but I have an idea of where we can start looking for evidence. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can find something Elena values more than keeping secrets buried. They talked for a few more minutes, developing the outlines of a plan that was risky and probably impossible, but offered the only real chance of freedom for both. When they separated, Sarah knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She was no longer just a waitress who had asked innocent questions. Now she was an active conspirator against very dangerous people. But as she walked back to the diner, Sarah also felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time since everything began, she had a plan and an ally. It was a dangerous plan and an unlikely ally, but it was better than living in constant fear. What she didn't know was that Elena Vasquez had discovered about the meeting in the park and was, at that exact moment, taking measures to ensure that Sarah Martinez would never again ask inconvenient questions about old photographs or anything else. The sandstorm had passed, but a much more dangerous storm was forming, and Sarah was right in the center of it. Friday dawned with a clear blue sky, contrasting dramatically with the previous day's sandstorm. But for Sarah Martinez, the clarity of the weather brought no relief, only a growing sense that time was running out. She had awakened several times during the night, each noise from outside making her heart race. Emma was safe at Mrs. Rodriguez's house, and Sarah had invented an excuse about plumbing problems in her apartment to explain the extended stay. The girl had accepted the explanation without questions, more interested in being able to watch Mrs. Rodriguez's favorite cooking shows than in understanding the complexities of the situation. Sarah arrived at Rosie's diner earlier than normal, hoping to have a few minutes to call Rebecca Chen, the Arizona Republic archivist that Arthur Brennan had mentioned. But when she arrived, she found Frank Kowalski waiting for her with a somber expression that immediately put her on alert. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, leading her to the small office in the back of the diner. The cramped space, normally cozy with its stacks of bills and Kowalski family photographs, now seemed claustrophobic and tense. "I received an interesting visit last night after you left," continued Frank, closing the door behind them. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he feared being heard even in his own establishment. Sarah felt her stomach contract. "What kind of visit?" "Elena Vasquez. She came here with two men who clearly weren't insurance salesmen." Frank sat heavily in his chair, which creaked under his weight. The worry lines on his face seemed to have deepened overnight. "She asked some questions about you, about your recent activities, about who you've been talking to, about your behavior at work." "What did you tell her?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer from Frank's defeated expression. "The truth, that you're an exemplary employee who does her job and goes home to take care of her daughter, that you've never been involved in trouble, never caused confusion, always been discreet and professional." Frank looked directly into her eyes, and Sarah saw decades of life experience reflected in his tired gaze. But Sarah, she didn't believe me. Or rather, she believed me, but didn't care. She made it very clear that she considers you a problem that needs to be solved, regardless of what kind of person you are. Sarah sat in the opposite chair, feeling her legs go weak. The small office suddenly seemed to be spinning around her. "Did she threaten you directly?" "Not directly. Elena is too smart to make explicit threats." Frank rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture Sarah had seen him make only when he was extremely stressed. "But she mentioned that it would be a shame if something happened to the diner. Problems with the health department, licensing issues, accidents with suppliers, that kind of thing. She was very specific about how small businesses like ours are vulnerable to so many unexpected problems." Frank stood up and walked to the small window that looked out onto the alley behind the diner. "She also mentioned Rose. Said my wife has a very fragile appearance for someone her age, and that it would be terrible if she suffered some kind of accident while taking her morning walks in the park." Sarah felt a wave of guilt and horror. "Frank, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to involve you in this." "I know that, dear. You had no choice." Frank turned to her, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. "But I don't have a choice now either. Sarah, I care about you like you were my own daughter, but I can't put Rose and our business at risk. You understand?" Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of understanding and despair. She understood perfectly. Frank was doing exactly what she would do if she were in his position, protecting the person he loved above all else. "Are you firing me?" "I'm giving you unpaid leave. Indefinite." Frank took a thick envelope from his shirt pocket. "Until this situation resolves itself, it would be better if you didn't show up here. Actually, it would be better if you didn't show up anywhere in Phoenix." Frank extended the envelope to her. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you. There are $3,000 in there. All the emergency savings that Rose and I had been keeping for a trip to Europe that we'll probably never take anyway. Use it to get out of the city. Start a new life somewhere else. Change your name, if necessary." Sarah looked at the envelope, touched by Frank's generosity, but knowing she couldn't accept it. The idea of taking the money that Frank and Rose had saved for years made her feel even worse about the whole situation. "Mr. Kowalski, I can't take your money. You've worked your whole life for this. And what good is money if we can't help someone we consider family?" Frank forced the envelope into her hands. "Sarah, you have a small daughter. She needs a living mother more than Rose, and I need a trip to Europe." "I can't run," said Sarah, her voice becoming firmer as her determination solidified. "If I run now, I'll spend the rest of my life running. Emma will grow up always looking over her shoulder, always wondering when they'll find us. That's no life." Frank studied her for a long moment. "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to end this, once and for all." Sarah stood up, putting the envelope in her pocket despite her reservations. She could return the money later, when all this was over. "But first I need to make a very important call." Frank pushed the office phone toward her without asking questions. Sarah dialed the number Arthur had given her, hoping Rebecca Chen would be available and willing to help a stranger in a desperate situation. Arizona Republic Archives, Rebecca speaking. The voice was professional but warm. Miss Chen, my name is Sarah Martinez. Arthur Brennan gave me your number. He said you might be able to help me find some information about events from 1962. There was a pause, and Sarah could hear the sound of papers being shuffled on the other end of the line. Arthur Brennan. It's been a while since I heard that name. Is he well? Still photographing? He is, though retired now. He told me you might have access to files that weren't published at the time. Files about things that were suppressed. That's very specific. And potentially dangerous. Rebecca's voice became more cautious. What kind of files are you looking for? And why are you interested in them? Sarah looked at Frank, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and decided to be completely honest. Information about the Oasis Casino and the people involved in its operation, specifically about events that happened during the inauguration in March 1962. And I'm interested because my life and my 6-year-old daughter's life may depend on this information. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could hear Rebecca breathing on the other end of the line, clearly weighing the risks of getting involved. This is a very serious situation. Are you sure you want to delve into this? Some stones are better left unturned. I wish I could do that, said Sarah, but it's too late for me. The stones have already been turned, and now I need to deal with what's underneath them. Rebecca sighed deeply. All right, I can meet you in an hour at the Central Library parking lot, north area near the trees. Come alone and make sure you're not being followed. If I suspect anything strange, I'll leave immediately. After hanging up, Sarah turned to Frank. I need to go out for a few hours. If anyone asks for me, you weren't here, Frank completed. But Sarah, be very careful. These people don't play around. They have resources you can't imagine. Sarah hugged Frank quickly, feeling like she was saying goodbye to a father. Thank you for everything. For giving me a chance when I needed work. For being kind to me and Emma. For protecting me now. Just come back alive, said Frank, his voice choked, and bring that beautiful girl back home. Sarah left the diner through the back, using the emergency exit that led to a narrow alley full of dumpsters and air conditioning equipment. She had parked her car 2 blocks away, a precaution that now seemed prescient. While walking through Phoenix's side streets, she constantly checked if she was being followed, using techniques she had learned from watching suspense movies. Stopping at shop windows to check reflections, making unnecessary turns, observing if the same cars appeared repeatedly in her field of vision. Phoenix's Central Library was a modern and imposing building in the city center, with clean lines and lots of glass that reflected Arizona's intense sun. The parking lot was large and offered multiple escape routes, a feature Sarah now appreciated much more than before. She arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time and used the time to observe the movement, looking for anything that seemed out of the ordinary. Cars with occupants who didn't get out, people who seemed to be watching instead of going about their business, any sign that the meeting could be a trap. Rebecca Chen was an Asian American woman in her mid-50s, probably in her late 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. She approached Sarah's car carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of use. Sarah Martinez, she asked, looking around nervously before approaching the car completely. That's me. Thank you for coming, especially considering the risks. Rebecca got into the car and immediately checked the rear-view mirrors, a habit Sarah recognized as belonging to someone who had learned to be cautious through experience. Arthur told me you were in trouble because of questions about the past. By the tone of your voice on the phone, he wasn't exaggerating, was he? Unfortunately, no. Sarah started the car and began driving slowly through the parking lot, keeping her eyes on the mirrors. What were you able to find? More than I expected, and definitely more than is safe for anyone to know. Rebecca opened the briefcase and took out several smaller file folders, each marked with dates and codes that Sarah didn't recognize. The Arizona Republic keeps files of all stories that were killed by external pressure. It's a standard journalistic practice, documenting censorship for possible future use in case circumstances change. Sarah stopped the car in an isolated area of the parking lot, under the shade of some trees that offered additional privacy. She took the first folder with hands that trembled slightly with anticipation and nervousness. Inside were dozens of documents, handwritten interview notes, black and white photographs, newspaper clippings from other cities, and what appeared to be copies of official documents that should never have left government files. "My God," murmured Sarah, leafing through the papers. "There are names here. Mayors, judges, police chiefs, businessmen I recognize from street names and buildings, and criminals," added Rebecca grimly. The casino was essentially a money laundering and institutionalized corruption center. But the most interesting and most dangerous is in this separate folder. Rebecca handed over a second folder, smaller but visibly heavier. These are documents that Arthur obtained through a source inside the casino itself. Someone who was documenting everything as a kind of life insurance. Sarah opened the second folder and found photographs of the nighttime meeting Arthur had mentioned. Grainy but clear enough photos to identify faces and activities. There was also a contract dated from the night of the inauguration. Vincent Torino, then 22 years old, agreeing to provide services and unconditional loyalty in exchange for the protection of his sister Maria. This person, Arthur's source, what happened to them? Died in a car accident 3 weeks after delivering these documents, along with their entire family. Rebecca lowered her voice. Arthur was so scared that he buried everything and never touched the subject again. Sarah quickly photographed the most important documents with her phone. In one of the meeting photographs, she noticed a young blonde woman in the background, a teenager, clearly uncomfortable, next to Marcus Webb. "Rebecca, who is this young woman in the photo?" Rebecca studied the image. "I'm not sure. The notes mentioned companions, but Arthur didn't identify everyone." Sarah enlarged the image on her phone. The resemblance to Elena Vasquez was disturbing. "Can I keep these documents?" "You can keep the originals. After 40 years, it's time they saw the light of day." Rebecca closed the folders. "But be very careful. These people still have power." After dropping off Rebecca, Sarah drove to an internet cafe in downtown. Using a rented computer, she researched the names from the documents. Marcus Webb had died, but his family still controlled security companies. Catherine Morrison was now a respected philanthropist. But it was when she researched Elena Vasquez that she found the crucial connection. Elena Catherine Morrison was Catherine Morrison's daughter. Comparing recent photos with the 1962 image of the young woman, the resemblance was undeniable. Sarah was about to leave when her phone rang. "Sarah Martinez?" The voice was female, young, loaded with fear. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Lisa. I work for Elena Vasquez. I need to talk to you. It's about your daughter." Sarah's blood froze. "What about my daughter?" "Not over the phone. Steel Park in 20 minutes. Come alone, or your daughter will pay the price." Sarah immediately called Mrs. Rodriguez to check if Emma was okay. She was. But the threat was real. At the park, Lisa, a fragile young woman in her 20s, was waiting nervously. "Eleanor is planning to use your daughter to force you to cooperate," said Lisa without preamble. "She has people watching where Emma is. If you don't do what she wants, they'll..." "What does Elena want?" "For you to disappear. Permanently. But first, she wants to know what you discovered and who you shared it with." Lisa looked around. "She knows about Arthur, about Vincent, about today at the library. Why are you warning me?" "Because I know what it's like to want to protect a daughter, and because I saw what Eleanor did to my younger sister." Lisa clenched her fists. Jessica asked innocent questions about discrepancies in the numbers. She was found dead 3 days later, apparently from an overdose, but she never used drugs. Lisa took a flash drive from her pocket. This contains files from Elena's personal computer, financial records, correspondence, recordings, enough to implicate her in dozens of crimes from the last 10 years. Sarah took the device. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because Elena underestimated you. She sees you as just a curious waitress, not as a real threat. That gives you an advantage." Lisa stood up. "You have maybe 24 hours before Elena loses patience completely." After Lisa left, Sarah was alone in the park, holding the flash drive. She had definitely crossed the point of no return. Now she was an active player in a deadly game. Sarah looked at Arizona's blue sky and took a deep breath. She had historical documents proving decades of corruption, digital evidence of current crimes, and unlikely allies. Now she needed to find a way to use all of this before Elena decided that patience had run out. The game was reaching its climax, and Sarah Martinez was determined to protect her daughter and expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. The photograph in Rosie's diner had triggered an avalanche of revelations that was about to bury decades of carefully guarded secrets. But first, she needed to ensure Emma was safe, because Sarah knew that once she used the information she now possessed, there would be no going back. Elena would never stop looking for her. The final battle was about to begin. Saturday dawned with an unsettling quiet in Phoenix. Sarah had spent the night awake in the small motel on the outskirts of the city, where she had registered under a false name, meticulously planning every move of her final play. Lisa's flash drive was connected to a borrowed laptop, revealing devastating evidence about Elena Vasquez. The files confirmed her worst fears. Financial records showed transfers of millions through shell companies. Correspondence detailed agreements to eliminate problems, and recordings captured Elena ordering assassinations. But the most shocking was a folder labeled Family Legacy that revealed Elena had been forced to participate in her mother's criminal activities since she was 14 years old. Around 7 a.m., Sarah received a message from Vincent. "Meet me at the old warehouse on Industrial Street, number 1247. Come alone. We have little time." At the abandoned warehouse, Vincent was with 3 middle-aged men, all with the appearance of people who had lived difficult lives but maintained a code of honor. "Sarah," said Vincent, "these are some associates of mine, people who, like me, are tired of living under Elena's control." One of them, Carlos Mendoza, explained, "We all lost people we loved because of Elena. We want to help." Vincent approached. "Elena is organizing a meeting tonight with all her main associates. She wants to consolidate her power and eliminate you." "How do you know this?" "Because I'm still officially one of her associates," said Vincent. "She summoned me, expecting me to help solve the Sarah Martinez problem." Vincent took out a small transmitter. "We can hide this at the meeting location. With the files you have, a live transmission would be enough to expose Elena and her entire organization." "Where is the meeting?" "At Catherine Morrison's mansion, Elena's mother. The same place where many conspiracies began." Sarah considered the risky plan. "And Emma? How do we ensure she stays safe?" "We've already taken care of that," Vincent assured her. They spent hours planning every detail. Vincent would plant the transmitter, Sarah would prepare the files for simultaneous upload, and the others would coordinate with the FBI and media. Around 3 p.m., Sarah received a call that made her freeze. "Mommy?" It was Emma, but her voice was strange, controlled. "Emma, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mommy, but there's a lady here who wants to talk to you." Elena's cold voice took the phone. "Hello, Sarah. I want you to come to the Morrison mansion tonight at 8 o'clock. Come alone and bring all the files you've collected. If you hurt her, I won't hurt Emma, but her safety depends on your actions." Elena paused. "Sarah, I know you discovered things about my past. You know I understand what it's like to be a child in a dangerous situation. I won't do to Emma what was done to me." The line was cut. Sarah was in total panic but also determined. "Change your plans," she said. "I'm going to that meeting. Elena made a mistake. She took my daughter. Now I have nothing to lose." Vincent saw something in her face that made him nod. "All right, but you'll wear a bulletproof vest and will be positioned around the property." The Morrison mansion was imposing, surrounded by high walls. When Sarah arrived at 8 o'clock, the gates opened automatically. Elena was waiting at the door, elegant in a black dress. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Emma is fine, as I promised." "Where is she?" "Safe. Let's talk first." Elena led her to a luxurious room. "I want to make a deal. You give me all the files and I let you both go away with enough money to start a new life. And if I refuse, then Emma grows up without a mother." It was then that Sarah heard Emma screaming, Mommy! From somewhere in the house. She's here, said Sarah, smiling. Why are you smiling? Sarah took the transmitter from her pocket. Because you just confessed your crimes to the entire world. Elena noticed the device and pulled a gun, but the windows exploded when Vincent and his team invaded simultaneously. Elena tried to use Sarah as a shield, but Vincent shot with precision, hitting her hand. Sarah ran to find Emma, who was locked in a room upstairs, scared but unharmed. Mommy, I was so scared, cried Emma. I know, my love, but now we're safe. Downstairs, Vincent was handcuffing Elena while sirens approached. The transmission had worked. Elena's confession was being broadcast on all news networks. Elena had one last card. Vincent, do you think this will end with me? I have information about you that will put you in prison. I know, Vincent replied calmly, and I'm ready to face the consequences. For the first time in 30 years, I'm ready to be free. In the following days, the Phoenix casino conspiracy dominated national headlines. Dozens were arrested, including prominent politicians and businessmen. Elena was sentenced to life in prison. Vincent, in exchange for his cooperation, received a reduced sentence with the possibility of parole in 15 years. Sarah decided to stay in Phoenix. The city was her home, and she had helped clean it up. Frank and Rose reopened Rosie's Diner with Sarah as manager. The 1962 photograph was still on the wall, but now with a plaque explaining its historical importance. Emma returned to school, and with time, the traumatic memories began to fade. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from Vincent in prison. Sarah, for the first time since I was 22 years old, I sleep in peace. Not because I'm in prison, but because I'm finally free from the secrets I carried. Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing. Sarah kept the letter and looked out the diner window, watching Emma play in the park under Mrs. Rodriguez's watchful eye. The photograph had kept its secrets for over 40 years, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Sarah Martinez, a simple waitress who had asked the right questions, had helped ensure that her daughter would grow up in a more just world. Arizona's sun shone through the windows, illuminating the old photograph. This time, there were no more secrets hidden in the shadows, only the promise of a brighter future.